something strange happening right now. And not just the war, not just the ceasefire, tentative as it is, but the way the story keeps changing almost in real time. And you'll have noticed in one moment there's escalation, there's threats from both sides, there's deadlines that are constantly moving. And then the next time you check the news or you hear it on a channel, there's a ceasefire. They're having negotiations. There's talks in Pakistan that have just taken place unsuccessfully. But before you've had time to process one version, another one appears. And it makes you wonder if there's an angle or not. So I thought today I'd try and slow this one down, because the real question isn't just what's happening. Part of that is very clear. Some of it's a bit opaque. But a bigger question is, who's telling you what it means and why? So let's start with the facts as we know them, as we can interpret them. There's been a 6-week conflict involving the US, Israel, and Iran. It escalated rapidly with strikes, retaliation, major disruption to global trade routes like the Strait of Hormuz. And now there's a temporary ceasefire, brokered with involvement from Pakistan. But that isn't a full resolution, that's a pause, that's a window in time while they're trying to sort things out. Now, the negotiations were taking place in Islamabad as of last night, with the major sticking points still unresolved. Primarily, Iran's nuclear program, control of shipping routes, sanctions relief, and regional military presence. And crucially, both sides are still accusing each other of violations, irrespective of the fact that these most recent talks were unsuccessful. Now, this isn't peace. All this is uncertainty. Don't let people convince you that this is peace that's been brokered. Because the ceasefire itself does tell a story if you pay closer attention. It was announced really quickly, it was communicated very inconsistently, and it still lacks clear terms. At one point, even the White House stepped back from delivering a formal national address because the agreement wasn't solid enough. At the same time, Iran has questions its validity, Israel continues operations in parts of the region, and tensions do remain high across the board. And that isn't stability. Again, don't be fooled into thinking it is. That's simply a holding pattern. And when reality becomes unstable, that's when narratives start to rush in to fill the gaps. It's natural. People are confused, people are concerned, people are anxious. And now layer in the domestic picture, because this war isn't happening in isolation. They rarely do. Public support has dropped significantly. That is undeniable. Polling shows that between 59 and 61% of Americans disapprove of the war, and Trump's approval rating has fallen to around 36%. More broadly, a majority of Americans believe the military response has been excessive, and most want the conflict to end quickly. That matters, because political pressure changes depending on how events are framed. When approval falls, the narrative often shifts from an escalation to we need to find a resolution. And that isn't always necessarily because the reality has changed, but it's because the personal stakes for the individuals in question have. And you can see this peppered all the way throughout history. Another big notable example is the Vietnam War. Now, pay attention next time you're listening to it about how the story's being told. At different points, we've heard, we're winning, the mission is complete, we're negotiating peace. If talks fail, we'll escalate further. And even within days, that message changes. But there is a pattern throughout it all. Certainty, followed by contradiction, followed by reframing, followed by certainty, followed by contradiction, followed by reframing. Because when the events are unclear, as they are in this war, as they are in many wars, the story becomes more important than the facts themselves, because there is something that has to be spun in a particular way for both sides. Now, Pakistan's role is particularly interesting in this. It's stepped in and been put forward as a mediator, offering a phased ceasefire, a diplomatic bridge, for want of a better word, and a way to slow escalation. And up until yesterday, although the talks failed, that mediation is holding. Pakistan are still involved in that process, but only just, really, especially since it failed on this first round. Because even during the negotiations, there was threats of renewed strikes, deadlines were still being issued, as they still are, and both sides are preparing for what happens if talks fail. At the minute, we just don't quite know. So the question then becomes, is this a path to peace, or is it just a pause before the next phase? Are they all just pausing before they do what they were always going to do anyway, and this is just misdirection? Now bring it all together. You've got a fragile ceasefire. You've got failing public support, you've got ongoing negotiations, and you've got continued threats. Those are all factual. Add on top of that multiple competing explanations from both sides. Depending who you listen to, it's a successful operation, a strategic miscalculation, a necessary intervention, or a crisis unfolding. Exactly the same events with completely different meanings. And that is the story of war throughout history. Because no matter who defines the meaning, is the person who defines how people respond. So here's a question I'm going to leave you with. When a story keeps changing and certainty keeps appearing before clarity, as far as they're concerned, ask yourself, what do we actually know? What do we know? And just as importantly, what is being filled in and told to us? Because the two things can be completely different. Because right now, we're not just watching a conflict on social media, on the news, reading it in newspapers. We're watching something else unfold alongside it in tandem. And it's a real-time attempt to try and define what a conflict means for us, according to them. And if you don't pause and take a step back, you're not just following the story, you're inheriting the story as told to you. Because the truth is always still there, always. It's just quieter. It's between the lines. It's in the nuance. It's definitely harder to see, certainly in this situation. But always, if you look with better eyes, it's hiding in plain sight.